3 years as the wife of a criminal boss, and I've never felt more alone. Tonight, I did something unforgivable. I laughed. With another man. And my husband, Cassian Drayce, the coldest man in Seoul, saw it all. Now he stands before me in the pouring rain, his icy eyes devoid of anger, filled with possessiveness. For the first time in 3 years, he looks at me as if I truly exist. And I know, I've just awakened the sleeping monster. Follow this story to the end. Like and comment the city you're viewing in so I know how far my story has come. The rain came down in sheets that night, hammering the glass walls of Vetro like bullets trying to break through. Seraphina Drayce sat across from a man whose name she had to remind herself to remember. Elias something, an architect with kind eyes and a nervous laugh that made her chest ache with how normal it sounded. Normal. When was the last time anything in her life had been normal? 3 years ago. Before the wedding. Before Cassian Drayce walked into her father's office and bought her like she was real estate. She reached for her wine glass, fingers trembling just enough that she had to grip the stem harder than necessary. Elias was talking about a building he was designing in Gangnam, something about sustainable materials and natural light, and she nodded at the right moments even though she could barely hear him over the blood rushing in her ears. This was stupid. This was so monumentally stupid. But she had needed this. One night where someone looked at her like she was a person instead of a possession tucked away on the 42nd floor of a penthouse she shared with a ghost. "You okay?" Elias asked, leaning forward slightly. His hand moved across the table like he might touch hers, then thought better of it. "Fine." The lie came easily. 3 years of lying made everything easy. "Just tired." "We can leave if you want. I know it's late." She shook her head too quickly. "No, this is nice, really." And it was. That was the problem. Sitting here in this overpriced restaurant with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, pretending she was someone who could do this kind of thing without consequences, felt like breathing after 3 years underwater. Dangerous. Addictive. Elias smiled at her, and she tried to smile back, but her face felt wrong, like she'd forgotten how the muscles worked. When was the last time she had smiled? Actually smiled. Not the careful, polite expression she wore at the occasional charity gala where Cassian's family paraded her out like proof of respectability. The restaurant hummed with quiet wealth around them. Low conversations, the clink of silverware on porcelain, soft piano music that probably cost more per hour than most people made in a week. Everyone here was beautiful in that specific Seoul way, surgically perfect, designer-wrapped, their wealth worn like armor. She fit right in. She always fit in. That was the entire point of her. "I'm glad you said yes to this," Elias said. His voice pulled her back. "I wasn't sure you would. After the gallery opening, I thought maybe I'd read the situation wrong." "The gallery opening?" She blinked, trying to remember. 2 weeks ago. Some modern art exhibit her mother-in-law had insisted she attend because appearances mattered. Always mattered. She'd stood in front of a painting that was just red slashes on white canvas for 20 minutes, wondering if the artist had felt as trapped as she did. And then this man had appeared beside her and made a joke about how the painting looked like his first architecture sketch. She'd laughed. Actually laughed. And he'd looked at her like that sound was worth something. "Yeah," he said now, ducking his head slightly. "You laughed at my terrible joke, and I thought, I don't know. I thought maybe you'd want to grab coffee or something, but then you disappeared before I could ask." Because Cassian's driver had been waiting outside. Because she had exactly 45 minutes of freedom before someone would notice she was gone. Because her entire life was measured in stolen moments and careful timing. "I'm here now," she said, and reached for her wine again. That's when the room changed. She felt it before she saw it. The way the temperature seemed to drop. The way conversations faltered and died like someone had cut the power. Her spine went rigid. Her fingers froze on the wine glass. And she knew, with the sick certainty of prey sensing a predator, that she was about to pay for this night in ways she couldn't imagine. Cassian Drayce walked into Vetro like he owned it. He probably did. He owned most of Seoul in one way or another. The buildings, the businesses, the people. Especially the people. Water dripped from his black coat onto the marble floor. His hair was soaked, pushed back from his face in a way that made him look younger than 35. Almost vulnerable if you didn't know better. But Seraphina knew better. She knew the ice-blue eyes that swept the restaurant with the casual assessment of a man who calculated threats the way other people calculated tips. She knew the sharp lines of his jaw, the way he held himself with absolute stillness that made every movement matter. And she knew, with sick horror flooding her veins, that those eyes had found her. He didn't rush. Cassian never rushed. He moved through the restaurant with the unhurried confidence of a man who knew no one would stop him, his security team materializing behind him like shadows. Diners turned to look, then quickly looked away, that peculiar soul instinct for recognizing danger and pretending not to see it. Elias was still talking, something about rooftop gardens, completely oblivious. Seraphina wanted to warn him, wanted to tell him to run, but her throat had closed up and she couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but watch her husband cross the restaurant floor toward their table. Seraphina, Cassian's voice was quiet. He always spoke quietly. Men who needed to shout weren't scary. Men like Cassian, who could destroy your life with a whisper, were terrifying. Elias stopped mid-sentence and looked up. His expression went from confused to concerned to something approaching fear in the space of 3 seconds. Smart man. "I'm sorry, are you?" Elias started. "Her husband." Cassian's gaze never left Seraphina's face. "You should go." She didn't mention." Elias looked at Seraphina, seeking some kind of explanation, some reassurance that this wasn't what it looked like. She had nothing to give him. Her voice had abandoned her completely. "Now." Cassian's voice dropped lower, and there was something in it that made Elias push back from the table immediately, nearly knocking over his chair in his haste to leave. He grabbed his jacket, threw money on the table, too much money, his hands shaking, and fled. She watched him go and felt something inside her chest crack open. Cassian slid into the chair Elias had vacated. Water from his coat pooled on the leather seat. Up close, she could see the rain beaded on his eyelashes, the slight tightness around his mouth that might have been anger on anyone else. On him, it was volcanic. 3 years, he said softly. 3 years I've left you alone. Let you have your space, your privacy, your freedom, and this is what you do with it. It was just dinner. Her voice came out thin, brittle. I needed to humiliate me? The words were sharp enough to cut. To parade around Seoul with some nobody while my enemies watch and calculate how weak I've become? That's not... I didn't think... No. He leaned forward, and she could smell rain and expensive cologne and something darker underneath. You didn't think. Because you live in a fantasy where actions don't have consequences, where you can play at being normal without understanding what normal costs in our world. Our world. He said it like they shared something. They shared nothing. They shared a last name and a penthouse with separate floors and a marriage certificate signed in her father's study while men with guns stood by the door. That was all they shared. I wanted one night, she whispered, and hated how her voice broke. One night where someone looked at me like I was human. Something flickered across Cassian's face. Pain, maybe, or something too dangerous to name. You think I don't see you? You think I haven't spent 3 years watching you drift through that penthouse like a ghost, counting the hours until you can escape to whatever charity function gives you an excuse to leave? You think I don't know? Then why? The question exploded out of her, 3 years of silence shattering. Why keep me there? Why marry me if you were just going to ignore me? Why? Because loving you makes me weak. The words came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep. Because every time I look at you, I lose focus. And men who lose focus in my position don't stay alive long enough to regret it. The confession hung between them like broken glass. Around them, the restaurant had gone completely silent. Everyone pretending not to listen while hearing every word. Seraphina stared at him. 3 years. 3 years of living in the same space and never touching, never talking beyond brief logistics about schedules and appearances. 3 years of convinced herself he felt nothing, that she was just a strategic acquisition designed to make the Drayce family look legitimate. And now he was telling her, "You're lying," she said. "I've never lied to you." He reached across the table and she flinched before she could stop herself. His hand froze halfway and something died in his eyes. He pulled back slowly. "I've hidden things, kept secrets, but I've never lied. I let you think exactly what I needed you to think, Because if my enemies knew you mattered, they would use you. They would take you apart piece by piece in front of me, and I would burn the entire city down trying to stop them. His jaw tightened. So, yes, I kept my distance. I made sure everyone thought you were decorative, meaningless. A contract wife who served her purpose by existing and nothing more. And now? Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. Now that they've seen you come here? Now that you've made a scene? Now they know. He stood, water still dripping from his coat onto the expensive carpet. Now they know touching you means war. Now they know you're not decorative. You're mine. And that changes everything. I'm not yours. She stood too, rage giving her courage she didn't know she had. I'm not property. I'm not a possession you can claim whenever you feel like it. I'm a person, Cassian. A person you've ignored for 3 years. I ignored you to protect you. You isolated me to control me. Yes. The admission was brutal in its honesty. Both things are true. Welcome to my world, Seraphina. Everything is a cage, even protection. He turned to leave, then paused. The driver is outside. Go home. We'll discuss this when I get there. And if I don't want to go home? He looked back at her, and for the first time she saw past the ice in his eyes to something burning underneath. Then I'll carry you there myself. And everyone in this restaurant will watch me do it, and tomorrow morning all of Seoul will know exactly what you mean to me. Is that what you want? She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw her wine glass at his head. She wanted to run out into the rain and disappear into the city and never come back. But she was learning, slowly and painfully, that wanting things didn't matter in the world she'd married into. Fine, she said. Fine, he echoed, and something in his voice suggested they were agreeing to very different things. He left without another word, his security team following like well-trained dogs. The restaurant exhaled collectively. Conversations resumed at a slightly higher pitch, sharp with gossip. Tomorrow this would be everywhere. The Drayce heir making a scene at Vetro over his mysterious wife. The wife no one had paid attention to until tonight. Seraphina sat back down because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She finished her wine in one long swallow and immediately regretted it when nausea rolled through her stomach. A waiter appeared at her elbow, silent and professional, with the check already prepared. No charge, of course. Cassian had made sure of that. She took the elevator down alone. The driver was indeed waiting outside, a silent man in his 50s who had been driving her to appointments for 3 years and had never once asked her a personal question. He opened the door. She got in. The leather seats were cold and smelled like air freshener. They drove through Seoul in silence, rain streaming down the windows until the city lights blurred into abstract paintings. She pressed her forehead against the glass and tried not to think about Elias's face when Cassian had told him to leave. Tried not to think about what would happen when she got home. The penthouse took up the entire top floor of the building. It was obscene in its luxury, marble and glass and designer furniture that cost more than most people's houses. She had her floor, Cassian had his, and there were common areas they both avoided like neutral territory in a war zone. She'd redecorated her space 3 times in 3 years, desperate to make it feel like home, and it still felt like a very expensive prison. She took the elevator straight to her floor, kicked off her heels in the entryway, and walked barefoot across cold marble to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Seoul sprawled beneath her, infinite and indifferent. Somewhere down there, Elias was probably at home, confused and maybe a little frightened. She should call him, warn him to forget he ever met her. But Cassian's people were probably already taking care of that. Making sure the architect understood that Seraphina Drayce, she'd taken the name even though it felt like swallowing poison, was untouchable. She was still standing at the window when she heard the elevator chime downstairs. Her body tensed automatically. Cassian never came to her floor. In 3 years of marriage, he had been in her space maybe twice, both times for appearances when his family came for inspections disguised as dinners. The unspoken rule was clear. She had her territory, he had his, and they never crossed the boundary. Footsteps on the stairs. Steady, unhurried. She didn't turn around when he entered. She could see his reflection in the window, dark against the lit room behind him. He'd changed clothes, dry now, in black pants and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up. She'd forgotten he had tattoos on his forearms, intricate designs in black ink that disappeared under the fabric. "You can't keep doing this," she said to his reflection. "Doing what?" "Acting like you care, showing up, making scenes. You've ignored me for 3 years, Cassian. You don't get to suddenly decide I matter. I never decided you didn't matter. He moved closer, stopping a few feet behind her, close enough to feel his presence, but not close enough to touch. I decided keeping you at a distance was the only way to keep you breathing. That's not your choice to make. Yes, it is. That's exactly what being married to me means. I make the choices that keep you alive whether you like it or not. She spun around to face him. I didn't ask for this, any of this. Your protection, your distance. You're suddenly caring that I had dinner with someone who actually talked to me like I was worth talking to. Your father made a deal to save his business and threw me in as collateral. I know, I was there. The bitterness in her voice could have stripped paint. But you could have said no. You could have married anyone. Why me? Because you were the only one who looked me in the eye during negotiations and didn't flinch. He said it simply, like it explained everything. Maybe it did. Because you walked into my world knowing exactly what it was, and you held your head up anyway. Because you're stronger than you think you are. I'm not strong, I'm trapped. Same thing in our world. She wanted to hit him. She wanted to cry. She wanted to rewind 3 years and make different choices, except she couldn't remember having any choices to make. Just her father's office and Cassian standing by the window looking at the city like he owned it, and papers pushed across a desk for her to sign. What do you want from me? She asked finally. Really? Not the contract marriage bullshit, not the strategic alliance. What do you actually want? Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved closer, and she could see the exhaustion in his face, the way he carried violence on his shoulders like weight that never lifted. I want you to understand that everything I've done, the distance, the isolation, all of it, was to keep you separate from the worst of what I am, to give you a chance at something like a normal life, even if it had to be lived in a cage. I don't want your version of protection. Then what do you want? The question sat between them, dangerous and loaded. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. I want to matter. Not as a contract, not as protection. I want to be seen. I see you. His voice dropped to something almost tender. I've always seen you. That's the problem. Then let me be part of your world instead of just a decoration in it. My world will destroy you. Your protection is already destroying me. At least give me the choice. He stared at her and she watched something shift behind his eyes. A calculation maybe, or surrender. If I do this, if I let you in, there's no going back. Once you see what my life really is, you can't unsee it. Once my enemies know you're more than decorative, they'll come for you, and I will do terrible things to keep you safe. I don't need safe. I need real. Real is bloody. Real is brutal. Real is making choices that keep you up at night for the rest of your life. Then let me make those choices for myself. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Outside, Seoul glittered with rain and neon. Inside, two people stood on opposite sides of an invisible line, deciding whether to cross it. Finally, Cassian nodded. Once. Sharp. Okay, you want in? You're in. Starting tomorrow, you're with me. Meetings, decisions, all of it. But when it gets ugly, and it will get ugly, you don't get to blame me for showing you what I really am. I won't. Yes, he said quietly, you will. But by then, it'll be too late. He turned to leave, and she called after him. Cassian? He paused in the doorway. What you said at the restaurant, about loving me, making you weak. Did you mean it? He looked back at her, and for just a moment the mask dropped completely. Every word. That's why I'm terrified of you. Then he was gone, and she was alone again in her glass tower, overlooking the city that never slept. But the next morning started with blood. Not hers, thankfully, but there was definitely blood on Cassian's shirt when he appeared in her kitchen at 6 a.m. like a particularly well-dressed nightmare. We have a problem, he said, pouring himself coffee from the pot she'd made 10 minutes earlier. She'd forgotten he knew where her kitchen was. Seraphina looked up from her phone, still in pajamas because he'd said they'd start tomorrow, but hadn't specified when tomorrow began. What kind of problem? The kind that involves someone sending your architect friend to the hospital last night. Her blood went cold. What? Broken ribs. Concussion. Someone worked him over pretty thoroughly in a parking garage around midnight. Cassian's voice was flat, professional. This was business. He's alive, but he's scared. Gave a description that matches one of my cousin's men. Your cousin did this? She was on her feet, rage making her hand shake. Why would... Because you mattered to me now, and he's ambitious. Cassian set down his coffee carefully. Marcus has been waiting for an opening to challenge my position in the family. Last night I handed him one by making a scene. This is him testing boundaries. So Elias got beaten because of me. Elias got beaten because my family is full of psychopaths who see violence as communication. He paused. But yes, because of you. This is what I meant about real being brutal. She wanted to throw up. She wanted to go back in time and stay home last night. Never meet Elias. Never laugh at his stupid joke. What are we going to do? We? He raised an eyebrow. You want it in. This is in. So tell me, what would you do? It felt like a test. Maybe it was. She forced herself to think past the guilt churning in her stomach. Your cousin is challenging you. If you back down, you look weak. If you retaliate too hard, you start a family war. Go on. So you need to respond, but make it clear the response is measured, controlled. She was making this up as she went, pulling from 3 years of watching Cassian's world from the outside. Hit him somewhere, he'll feel it, but can't retaliate without looking like he escalated first. Cassian's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes looked almost like pride. What did you have in mind? I don't know. I don't know how these things work. You're learning. He pulled out his phone, typed something quick. Marcus has a nightclub in Itaewon. Very profitable, very illegal. We're going to shut it down tonight. We? You wanted to be part of this world. Welcome to the orientation. He finally smiled, and it was a cold, sharp thing. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty. The nightclub was called Obsidian, and it looked exactly like what it was, a front for money laundering wrapped in velvet and strobe lights. Seraphina stood outside in the alley behind the building, wearing black jeans and a leather jacket Cassian had somehow produced in her size, watching his people work with the efficiency of a military operation. They weren't destroying anything. That would have been crude. Instead, they were copying files from the back office, documenting every financial irregularity, every instance of Marcus's people skimming profits that should have gone to the family. Evidence that would bury him if it reached the right people. This is how you fight wars in my world, Cassian said beside her. Not with guns. Well, not usually with guns. With information, with leverage, with making your enemy destroy themselves. She watched a woman in tactical gear emerge from the office carrying a hard drive. What happens to Marcus? He'll have a choice. Step back from challenging me, or I show this to my father and the family council. Either way, he learns that hurting you has consequences. And Elias? Will receive an extremely generous settlement from an anonymous benefactor, enough to cover his hospital bills and then some. And Marcus's man who did the beating will have an unfortunate accident that puts him out of commission for a few months. Cassian's voice was matter of fact. Nothing fatal, just painful. It should have bothered her more. The casual violence, the cold calculation, but standing in that alley watching Cassian's people operate with surgical precision, she felt something else entirely, a strange kind of power. This was the world she'd married into, the world she'd demanded to be part of, and she was starting to understand that power here didn't come from being the loudest or the most violent. It came from knowing exactly where to cut. The operation took less than 30 minutes. They were back in the car before anyone inside the club even noticed something was wrong. That's it? She asked as they drove through Seoul's pre-dawn streets. That's it. By tomorrow morning, Marcus will receive copies of what we found. By tomorrow evening, he'll back down. By next week, everyone in the family will know what happens when you come after what's mine. I'm not property. No, Cassian agreed, glancing at her. You're much more dangerous than property. You're a person I'm willing to go to war for. That makes you the most powerful weapon anyone could use against me. And now everyone knows it. She should have been scared. She probably was scared, somewhere under the adrenaline. But mostly she felt alive in a way she hadn't in 3 years. They drove in silence until they reached the penthouse. The city was starting to wake up around them. Early risers heading to jobs. Delivery trucks making their rounds. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware of the shadow world operating beneath the surface. In the elevator, Cassian said, "You did well tonight." "I didn't do anything. I just watched." "You thought strategically. You understood the play without me having to explain it. That's more than most people in my family can manage." He paused. "My father wants to meet you. The real you, not the decorative version we wheel out for appearances." "Why?" "Because I told him you're taking an active role in family business, and because he's curious about the woman who made me lose my composure in public for the first time in a decade." The elevator opened onto her floor. She stepped out, then turned back. "Cassian, what happens if I fail? If I can't handle your world?" He looked at her with those ice-blue eyes that had terrified her for 3 years, and she finally understood they weren't cold at all. They were burning so hot they'd gone past color into something else entirely. "Then I let you go," he said simply. "I tear up the contract, give you your freedom, and spend the rest of my life making sure you're protected from a distance." "You do that?" "I'd do anything for you. That's the problem. That's why I stayed away." The elevator doors started to close, and he didn't stop them. "That's why this is so dangerous." The doors closed, and she was alone again. But this time, the loneliness felt different. 3 days later, a man named Lucian Voss walked into her life, and everything changed. She was at a charity gala, the kind of event she'd attended dozens of times before, smiling and making small talk while raising money for causes that made the Drayce family look respectable. Cassian was across the room talking to city officials, playing the role of legitimate businessman so convincingly she almost believed it herself. "You look bored," a voice said behind her. She turned to find a man in a perfectly tailored suit, dark hair touched with silver at the temples, holding 2 champagne flutes. He was handsome in a way that was almost too perfect. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, eyes that were warm where Cassian's were ice. "I am bored," she admitted, taking the champagne he offered. "These things are always the same." "Ah, but you're not the same," he smiled. 3 days ago you were invisible. Tonight everyone is watching you. That must feel strange." "How do you know? That you've been invisible?" "Please. I've been watching the Drayce family for years. You're the wife who didn't exist until recently. Now suddenly you're everywhere, at meetings, in the background of important conversations, standing beside Cassian like you belong there." He sipped his champagne. "It's fascinating." Warning bells went off in her head. "And you are?" "Lucian Voss. I run import-export operations primarily focused on—" "Weapons," she interrupted. She'd been studying Cassian's world, learning the players. Lucien Voss was one of the biggest arms dealers in Asia, technically legitimate, but everyone knew better. "You supply half the conflicts in the region." His smile widened. "I like you. Most people pretend not to know what I do. Most people are scared of you." "Are you scared of me, Mrs. Drayce?" She should be. But standing there with his attention focused on her like a spotlight, she felt something else entirely. Seen. Valued. He was looking at her like she was interesting, not just a piece on Cassian's board. "I'm married to Cassian," she said. "You're going to have to work harder than charm if you want to scare me." Lucien laughed, genuine and warm. "Oh, I'm definitely going to enjoy knowing you. Tell me something. How does it feel to suddenly matter?" The question was too sharp, too knowing. "What makes you think I didn't matter before?" "Because I know Cassian. He's brilliant at keeping the things he cares about hidden. He kept you tucked away for 3 years like a secret weapon, and now he's deploying you." Lucien's eyes glinted. "The question is why? What changed?" She thought about lying, then decided she was tired of lying. "I changed. I stopped being willing to live in a cage." "Good." He handed her a business card, simple black with silver lettering. "When you get tired of his version of freedom, call me. I've been known to offer alternatives." "Alternatives to what?" "To everything." He nodded toward Cassian across the room. "Your husband is brilliant, powerful, absolutely ruthless when he needs to be. But he's also trapped by his family, his responsibilities, his need to protect you by controlling you. Sometimes the cage is just prettier." Before she could respond, Cassian appeared at her elbow like he'd materialized from shadows. "Voss?" "Drayce." Lucien's smile never wavered. "I was just meeting your lovely wife. You've been hiding her." "Not anymore." Cassian's hand settled on Seraphina's lower back, possessive and warm. "If you'll excuse us." He steered her away through the crowd, and she caught Lucien watching them go with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Stay away from him," Cassian said quietly once they were out of earshot. "Why? Is he dangerous?" "Everyone in this room is dangerous, but Voss is—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "He's been trying to expand his operations into Seoul for years. My family has been blocking him. He would love nothing more than to find leverage against me." "And you think I'm leverage?" "I know you are." His hand tightened slightly on her back. "Which is why I need you to be careful. Voss is charming. He's convincing. He'll make you feel like you're the most important person in the world, and then he'll use that to destroy everything." She thought about the business card in her clutch. He seemed, what? Nice? Respectful? Actually interested in what you have to say? Cassian's voice was sharp. "That's the point. That's how he operates. He finds the wound and presses until you break." They reached a quiet corner of the ballroom. Cassian turned her to face him, and she could see tension in every line of his body. "I'm trying to let you in," he said. "I'm trying to give you what you asked for, but you have to trust me when I tell you someone is dangerous." "Like you're dangerous?" "Worse than me. Because I'll tell you I'm a monster. Voss will convince you he's saving you from monsters while he's devouring you alive." She wanted to argue, but looking into Cassian's eyes, she saw something that might have been fear, real fear, not for himself but for her. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll be careful. Thank you." He released her, stepping back. "We should stay another hour for appearances, then we can leave." But as they circulated through the gala, making small talk and playing their roles, Seraphina found her hand drifting to her clutch, feeling the edge of Lucien Voss's card. Sometimes the cage is just prettier. The words wouldn't leave her alone. And in the car ride home, with Cassian silent beside her and Seoul glittering outside, she realized she was standing on the edge of something that would either save her or destroy her completely. She just wasn't sure which man would be holding the knife when she finally fell. The card sat in her jewelry box for 2 weeks like a live grenade. Seraphina would catch herself staring at it sometimes. Black card, silver lettering, a phone number that promised alternatives. She hadn't called. She wouldn't call. But she also hadn't thrown it away. And that fact alone felt like betrayal. Cassian was keeping his promise. She attended meetings now, sat in on strategy sessions, learned the brutal arithmetic of power in Seoul's underworld. How much violence was too much, how much mercy was weakness, how to read a room full of men who smiled while plotting your death. Should have brought them closer. Instead, she felt the distance growing. Because every time Cassian explained something, the networks, the payoffs, the careful balance of terror and respect, she could feel him editing, softening, still protecting her from the worst of it even as he pretended to let her in. She'd catch him exchanging looks with his lieutenant, Min Jae, subtle redirects that steered conversations away from topics he didn't want her hearing. She was in the room, but she still wasn't really there. 3 weeks after the gala, she found herself alone in Cassian's study while he was out handling something he'd described as minor territorial dispute with the kind of careful vagueness that meant it was probably very bloody. The room was all dark wood and leather, the desk obsessively organized in a way that made her want to mess something up just to see if he'd notice. She shouldn't have been snooping. She knew better, but her hands were already opening drawers before her brain could talk her out of it. Financial records, meeting notes. Nothing interesting until she found the locked drawer. It took her 15 minutes and a hairpin to get it open. Inside, a tablet, password protected, but set to auto-login. And files, dozens of them. She sat down in his chair and started reading. The first file was surveillance footage from the restaurant that night. Vetro, the night everything changed, but not from the restaurant's cameras, from Cassian's security team. Multiple angles, timestamps going back hours before she'd even arrived. He'd known. He'd known she was there before he walked in. Her hands started shaking as she opened the next file. More surveillance. Her meeting Elias at the gallery 2 weeks earlier. Her coffee with a friend from college. Her afternoon walk through Bukchon where she'd stopped to pet a street cat. Months of footage, maybe years. Every moment of freedom she thought she'd had, he'd been watching. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn around. Couldn't. Her eyes were still locked on the screen, showing herself sitting alone in a cafe 6 months ago, looking so desperately lonely it hurt to watch. You weren't supposed to find that, Cassian said quietly. No. Her voice sounded far away. I don't imagine I was. How long? Since the beginning. All of it? Every time you left the building? Every person you spoke to? Every place you went? He moved into the room but kept his distance. I told you, my enemies would use you against me. I needed to make sure you stayed safe. She finally looked at him. Safe. You keep using that word like it means something other than controlled. In my world, they're the same thing.
No.
No. She stood up, pushing away from the desk. No, they're really not. Safety would be trusting me to make my own choices. This is, she gestured at the screen. This is obsession. This is stalking. This is love in the only way I know how to give it. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Messy, fucked up, but real. You call this love? Watching me like I'm a suspect? Tracking my every move? I call this making sure you wake up every morning. He moved closer, and she could see exhaustion carved into his face. You want to know what happened to the last person someone tried to use against my family? They sent her back in pieces. 17 pieces, to be exact. They made her husband count them before they killed him, too. The image hit her like cold water. That's exactly what this is. That's the world you married into. That's why I watched you. Because the alternative was waiting for someone to grab you off the street and mail me your fingers one at a time until I gave them what they wanted. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, overreacting, paranoid. But she'd sat in enough meetings now to know he wasn't. The violence in his world wasn't theoretical. It was Tuesday afternoon business. You should have told me, she said finally. Would you have felt safer knowing? I would have felt like I had a choice. You've never had a choice. Not since your father signed those papers. He said it brutally, without mercy. You can hate me for it, but at least you're alive to hate me. The worst part was he meant it. Every word. This was his version of love, surveillance and control wrapped in protection. And maybe in his world that was the best anyone could hope for. But it still felt like drowning. I need air, she said, moving toward the door. His hand caught her wrist. Not hard, but firm. Where are you going? I don't know. Out. Away? Does it matter? Yes. His grip tightened slightly. It always matters. Because every time you walk out that door, I have to calculate the 1,000 ways you might not come back. She pulled free. Then maybe you should have married someone you didn't have to protect. I didn't want to protect you. The confession came out raw. I wanted you. The protection was just what came with it. She left before he could say anything else. Down the elevator, through the lobby, out into Seoul's late afternoon heat. The security team materialized around her like they always did. 2 cars, 4 men, all of them pretending she couldn't see them. She walked for blocks without destination, just needing movement, needing space. The city pressed in around her, crowds and noise and the peculiar anonymity of being alone in millions. Nobody here knew who she was. Nobody cared about the Drayce empire or criminal networks or surveillance files. She should have felt free. Instead, she felt exposed. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. You look like you could use that alternative I mentioned. Coffee? She stopped walking. The security team stopped with her, trying to look casual 50 feet back. She stared at the message, knowing exactly who it was from. This was a line, a clear, bright line. On one side was Cassian and his surveillance and his brutal honesty about what loving him meant. On the other was, what? Someone who saw her as more than something to protect? She typed back before she could stop herself. Where? The response came immediately with an address in Gangnam, 30 minutes away, public place, a cafe in a busy shopping district. Safe. Probably. She should tell Cassian, should call him, explain where she was going, who she was meeting, play by the rules he'd set. Instead, she flagged a taxi. The security team tried to follow, but Seoul traffic was a beautiful chaos if you knew how to use it. 3 turns and 1 subway station later, she'd lost them. The guilt hit immediately. They'd be panicking, calling Cassian, probably scrambling every asset he had to find her. Good. Let him panic. Let him feel what it was like to not have control. The cafe was exactly as Lucien had described. Crowded, anonymous, the kind of place where nobody looked twice at anyone. He was already there when she arrived, sitting by the window in a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, looking completely at ease. "You came," he said, standing as she approached. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either." She sat down across from him. "I think I just committed about 17 crimes against my marriage." "Only 17? I'm disappointed." He signaled the waiter for 2 coffees. "How long until your husband's people find you?" "I lost them. Maybe an hour if I'm lucky." "Then we should make this count." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Tell me something true, Seraphina. Are you happy?" The question was so direct it caught her off guard. "I don't know if happiness is the point anymore." "That's not an answer." "No," she admitted. "I'm not happy, but I'm not sure I was ever supposed to be." "Everyone is supposed to be happy. That's the entire point of being alive." His voice was gentle but firm. "And before you tell me that's naive, I know what world we live in. I know the cost of power. But there's a difference between accepting necessary sacrifice and accepting a prison. Cassian would say the prison keeps me alive. Cassian would say anything to keep you." Lucien's eyes darkened. "But here's what he won't tell you, that protection comes at a price. Your autonomy, your identity, eventually your soul. You become an extension of him rather than a person in your own right." The words hit too close to home. "And what would you offer instead?" "Respect, partnership, an actual voice in your own life." He paused. "And the truth about why Cassian Drayce is so desperate to control you." Her pulse quickened. "What truth?" "That there are things in his past he doesn't want you knowing, choices he made before you met, choices that would change how you see him." "Like what?" Lucien glanced around the cafe, then pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a photograph, dated 7 years earlier. Cassian, younger but unmistakable, standing beside a burned-out car wreckage. His expression was blank in the way that meant carefully constructed, and in the background, police tape and covered bodies. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "An accident that wasn't an accident. A car crash that killed 3 people, including my wife." His voice stayed steady, but she could hear the pain underneath. "Officially ruled mechanical failure. Unofficially arranged by the Drayce family to send a message about territorial boundaries." Her stomach dropped. "That's not... Cassian wouldn't..." Cassian gave the order. He was 28, newly promoted, trying to prove himself to his father. "My wife, Elena, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Collateral damage in a power play." She stared at the photo, at Cassian's face, trying to find evidence of the man she knew in that younger version standing beside death. "I don't believe you," she said, but her voice shook. "I wouldn't believe me either. That's why I have proof." He pulled up another photo, documents, official records with Drayce family seals. Bank transfers, communications, everything you'd need to verify that the man you married has more blood on his hands than he's admitted. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you deserve to know who you're protecting, who you're sacrificing your freedom for." He took his phone back. "Elena was innocent. She was a teacher, for God's sake. She had nothing to do with my business. But she loved me, and that made her a target. And Cassian..." His voice hardened. Cassian decided her life was worth less than a point he needed to make. Seraphina's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. "Even if this is true, and I'm not saying it is, what do you want from me?" "Justice, accountability, a chance to make sure no one else loses someone they love because the Drayce family thinks they're untouchable." He leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to betray Cassian. I'm asking you to hold him accountable for what he's done." "By doing what?" "By testifying. By helping me gather evidence that can actually hold up in court. By choosing to be more than his accomplice." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think I have access to evidence? You think he trusts me with anything real? I think you have access to him, to his spaces, to conversations no one else hears." Lucien's gaze was intense. I think you could help me build a case that actually matters. Not revenge. Justice. Real justice. Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again and again. Messages flooding in. Where are you, Seraphina? Answer me. This isn't funny. If someone took you, I swear to God. She could feel Cassian's panic through the screen. He's looking for you, Lucian observed. He's always looking for me. That's the problem. She stood up. I need to think about this. Don't think too long. The longer you're in his world, the harder it becomes to see the way out. He stood too, placing a hand over hers. You're not trapped, Seraphina. You just have to choose not to be. She pulled away and left without another word. Cassian was waiting in the lobby when she got home. Not upstairs in the penthouse, in the actual lobby, pacing like a caged animal while his security team tried to pretend they weren't watching their boss have a breakdown in public. He saw her and went completely still. Then he crossed the marble floor in 4 long strides and pulled her against him so hard she lost her breath. His heart was hammering against her cheek, his hands fisted in her jacket like he was afraid she'd disappear. Don't ever do that again, he said into her hair. Don't ever. I thought, I'm fine. I just needed space. He pulled back enough to look at her face, and his eyes were wild. You lost my security team, in Seoul, where anything could have happened, where anyone could have... He stopped, clearly trying to get control of himself. Where were you? She could lie, should lie, but she was so tired of lying. I met with Lucien Voss. The temperature in the lobby dropped 10 degrees. Cassian's expression went from relieved to something that might have been betrayal if he allowed himself to feel things that human. You what? You heard me. His hands dropped from her jacket. After I specifically told you he was dangerous. After I warned you he would try to use you. You met with him anyway. Yes. Why? The word came out quiet, dangerous quiet. Because I wanted to hear his side, because I'm tired of only knowing what you decide to tell me. Because, she took a breath. Because he told me about Elena. Cassian went absolutely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. He told you what about Elena? That you killed her 7 years ago, car accident that wasn't an accident, that you ordered it to make a point about territory. And you believed him. I don't know what I believe, that's why I'm asking you. She met his eyes. Did you do it? Did you order someone's death, someone innocent, just to send a message? The silence stretched between them like broken glass. Yes, he said finally. The confirmation hit her like a physical blow, even though she'd expected it. She was innocent. She was collateral damage in a war I didn't start, but had to finish. I was 28, trying to prove I could lead. My father said I was too soft, too hesitant. So when Voss pushed into our territory, when he made it clear he thought the Drayce family was weak, I pushed back. His voice was flat, factual. The car was supposed to scare him, kill his driver maybe, send a message, but the driver panicked and swerved into oncoming traffic. 3 people died. Elena was one of them. That doesn't make it better. I know. You killed someone's wife. Yes. And you never told me. No. He looked at her with those burning ice eyes. Because you would look at me exactly the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm a monster, and I needed... His voice cracked. I needed you to see something else when you looked at me, even if it was a lie. She wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, wanted to rewind 3 years and never sign those papers in her father's office. What else haven't you told me? She asked. Do you really want to know? Yes. Everything. He said it simply. Every choice I've made, every order I've given, every body that's hit the ground because I decided it was necessary. You want the full list? It'll take hours, days maybe. And by the end of it, you won't be able to look at me without seeing blood. I already see blood. No. He stepped closer. You see the edges, the sanitized version. You see what I let you see. The real thing, the actual cost of what I do, would destroy whatever you think you feel for me. Maybe it should. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Cassian nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. Maybe you should go. File for divorce. Take the settlement. Start over somewhere far from Seoul where my name doesn't reach. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Min-jae, draw up the papers. Full dissolution. She gets whatever she wants. Wait, is she? No. He turned away from her. You're right. This was always going to end like this. I can't be what you need. I can't be anything except what I am, and what I am kills people. So go. Get out while you still can. She stared at his back, at the rigid line of his shoulders. This should be relief. This should be exactly what she wanted. Freedom. Escape. A life that didn't involve surveillance and violence and moral compromises. Instead, it felt like falling. What if I don't want to go? The words came out before she could stop them. Then you're an idiot. He didn't turn around. Because staying means becoming part of it. Every choice I make, you're complicit. Every body you helped hide. Every sin you share. There's no innocent bystander position in my world, Seraphina. You're either in or out. What if I choose in? Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make sure you don't regret it. And failing, because you will regret it. That's the only guarantee I can give you. She walked around him until she could see his face. His expression was carefully blank, but she could see something breaking underneath. Cassian, look at me. He did, reluctantly. I don't want perfect. I don't want sanitized. I want real. Even if real is bloody and fucked up and morally compromised. She took a breath. But I need you to stop protecting me from the truth. If we're doing this, if I'm really in, then I need all of it, including the parts you think will make me leave. You say that now. I say that because I mean it. Stop deciding what I can handle. Stop editing your world for me. Give me the choice. He studied her face like he was searching for something. Certainty, maybe. Or madness. If I do this, if I really let you see everything, you might not survive it. Not physically, psychologically. This life breaks people, Seraphina. Even the strong ones. Then let me break. At least I'll break knowing the truth. The elevator chimed behind them. Min-jae stepped out holding a tablet, clearly prepared to start drafting divorce papers. Cassian held up a hand to stop him. We're not doing that. Not tonight. Boss? She's staying. For now. He looked back at Seraphina. Against my better judgment, and probably hers, she's staying. Min-jae nodded and disappeared back into the elevator without comment. Years of working for Cassian had taught him when not to ask questions. They stood in the lobby in silence until Seraphina finally spoke. So what now? Now we go upstairs. And I tell you every terrible thing I've done since I took over this family. Every choice, every consequence. And you decide whether you can live with it. And Lucy? Cassian's jaw tightened. Lucien Voss is playing a game. I don't know the rules yet, but his wife's death was 7 years ago. If he wanted revenge, he could have taken it 100 times over. The fact that he's coming at me now, through you, means something else is happening. Like what? Like he's not after justice. He's after leverage. And you're it. He started toward the elevator. Come on, if we're doing this, we're doing it properly. No more secrets, no more protection, just the truth, however ugly it is. She followed him into the elevator, and as the doors closed, she caught sight of herself in the mirrored walls, pale, determined, standing beside a man who had just admitted to murder with the same tone most people used to discuss the weather. This should terrify her. It probably did terrify her, but somewhere under the fear was something else, something that felt almost like power. They stayed up until dawn. Cassian talked and she listened, sitting in his study while Seoul glittered outside the windows. He told her about the first person he'd killed, a lieutenant in his father's organization who'd been skimming money 15 years ago when Cassian was barely 20. He told her about territorial disputes that ended with bodies in the Han River, about bribes paid to police and politicians, about people who'd disappeared because they'd become liabilities. He didn't sugarcoat any of it, didn't try to justify or explain away, just laid it out like evidence in a trial and let her judge. And she did judge. She couldn't help it. Every story made her sick. Every casual mention of violence made her want to leave. But she stayed, kept listening, kept trying to reconcile the man telling these stories with the man who'd held her in the lobby like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. How do you live with it? She asked finally, as dawn broke pink and gold over the city. I don't. Not really. He looked exhausted, carved hollow by confession. I just keep moving Keep making the next choice. Keep telling myself that the alternative, watching my family destroy itself, watching innocent people get caught in the crossfire of rival families fighting for control, would be worse. Maybe I'm lying to myself. Probably I am. But it's the lie that lets me get out of bed in the morning. Does it get easier? No, it gets normal, which is worse. She stood up and walked to the window. The city was waking up below. Early commuters, delivery trucks, normal people living normal lives. She used to be one of them. Before her father's business collapsed. Before the marriage. Before she learned that Seoul had two faces and she was trapped on the wrong one. What did Lucien say to you? Cassian asked behind her. Besides the Elena story, what did he offer? Justice. A way to hold you accountable. A chance to be more than your accomplice. Tempting. Very. She turned to look at him. But here's what bothers me. If he wanted justice, why wait 7 years? Why approach me now? Why not go after you directly? Because direct won't work. He's tried before. I have too much protection, too many people loyal to me, so he's trying a different angle. Me. You. Cassian leaned back in his chair. Get close to you, make you doubt me. Use you to get access to information or create division in the family, classic infiltration tactics. So I'm a pawn, again. In his game, yes. In mine, he met her eyes. I'm trying very hard not to make you one, but the truth is everyone in this world is a piece on someone's board. The only question is whether you know you're being played. Her phone buzzed, text from the unknown number. Thinking about our conversation, when you're ready to make a choice, call me. She showed the message to Cassian. What do I do? Whatever you want. I'm not going to control this. That's a first. I'm trying to learn. He smiled tiredly. Turns out being honest is exhausting. I don't recommend it. Little late for that advice. Yeah. He stood up, moving to the window beside her. They stood there in silence, watching the city wake up, and for a moment it felt almost normal, almost like two people who chose each other instead of being forced together by contracts and power plays. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen and his expression changed. I have to take this. What's wrong? Work. He answered the phone, listened for 10 seconds, and his face went absolutely blank. When? Where? Who knows? A pause. Lock it down. I'm coming now. He hung up and grabbed his jacket. What happened? Seraphina asked. Someone hit one of our warehouses in Incheon, took out 3 of my men and stole $500,000 in product. Who? That's what I'm going to find out. He paused at the door. Stay here. Don't leave the building. Don't contact anyone. Not Lucian, not your friends, not anyone. Cassian, please. The word came out desperate. Just for today, until I know what we're dealing with. She nodded, and he left. The silence in the study felt oppressive after he was gone. She stood at the window watching the sun climb higher, thinking about everything he'd told her. About Elena and accidents that weren't accidents. About justice and revenge and the difference between the two. Her phone buzzed again. The warehouse in Incheon was just the beginning. If you want to stop more people from dying, call me. We can end this together. She stared at the message, ice flooding her veins. Lucian knew about the attack, which meant either he had incredible intelligence networks or he'd been the one to order it. She called the number. He answered on the first ring. I was hoping you'd call. Did you do it? The warehouse? I did what was necessary to show you what Cassian really is, how he handles problems, how quickly he'll sacrifice his own people to maintain power. You killed people to make a point. Cassian killed my wife to make a point. I'm simply returning the favor. His voice was calm, reasonable. But unlike him, I'm giving you a choice. Help me stop this cycle of violence or watch it continue until there's no one left standing. That's not a choice. That's blackmail. That's reality. War is coming, Seraphina, between me and the Drayce family. It's been coming for 7 years. You can either help me end it quickly with minimal casualties, or you can stand by your husband and watch Seoul burn. He paused. Where's your moral line? How many bodies until you say enough? She closed her eyes. What do you want from me? Access. Information. Help me understand his operations well enough to dismantle them without unnecessary bloodshed. Give me what I need to bring him down cleanly. That's betrayal. That's justice. There's a difference. I need to think. You don't have time to think. The next attack happens in 48 hours. Bigger, worse, unless you help me make it unnecessary. The line went dead. Seraphina stood alone in Cassian's study as Seoul glittered outside, holding a phone that felt like a loaded gun, and realized she was standing at the exact moment where every choice led to disaster. Help Lucienne and betray her husband, stay loyal to Cassian, and become complicit in whatever came next. There was no good answer, no right choice, just different versions of wrong. Her phone rang. Cassian. Yeah? Are you okay? You sound... Fine, I'm fine. What's happening? It's bad. Professional hit, military precision, someone who knows our operations. He sounded tired. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Cassian. Yeah? She opened her mouth to tell him about Lucien's call, about the threat, about the choice she was being forced to make, but the words wouldn't come. Be safe, she said instead. Always. He hung up. She stood there holding her phone, watching the sun climb higher over Seoul, and realized she'd already made her choice. She just didn't know which one it was yet. She made the call at 2 a.m, not to Lucienne, to Cassian. He answered on the second ring, voice rough with exhaustion. What's wrong? Where are you? Still at the warehouse, processing the scene. Why? I need to tell you something. Her hands were shaking so hard she had to grip the phone with both of them. Lucian called me after you left. He knew about the attack before anyone reported it. Cassian, I think he's the one who did it. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds too long. I know, Cassian said finally. You know? How long have you? Since about an hour after it happened. His people left traces, sloppy ones, like they wanted us to know. She could hear him moving, footsteps echoing in what sounded like a metal space. What did he say to you? That more attacks are coming, that I could help him stop them if I gave him information about your operations, that I had 48 hours to decide. And what did you tell him? Nothing. I hung up. Then I called you. Another silence. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, softer, almost tender. Thank you for telling me. What are you going to do? What I always do, protect what's mine. He paused. Go to sleep, Seraphina. I'll be home soon. We'll figure this out. Cassian, I love you. You know that, right? Whatever happens next, you need to know that. The words hit her like a fist. 3 years of marriage, and he'd never said them out loud. Not once. Not even when she'd begged to hear them during those early, desperate months when she'd still thought love might make the cage bearable. Why are you saying this now? Because I should have said it 3 years ago. Because I'm tired of protecting you from the truth. Because if something happens, nothing's going to happen. We're going to fix this, together. Yeah. He sounded like he was smiling, but it was the saddest sound she'd ever heard. Together. Get some sleep. He hung up before she could respond. She stood in the dark penthouse looking out at Seoul's night skyline and felt dread settling into her bones like ice. Something was wrong. Something in his voice, in the timing, in the way he'd said those words like goodbye. She called him back. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same thing. Panic rising now, sharp and chemical in her throat. She called Min Jae. He answered immediately. Mrs. Drayce? Where's Cassian? I just talked to him and now his phone is off. He left the warehouse about 10 minutes ago. Said he had something to handle personally. Didn't want backup. Where did he go? He didn't say, but... Min Jae hesitated. He told me if anything happened to him, I should make sure you were protected. Full security detail. Safe house if necessary. Those were his exact words. If anything happened, Min Jae, what the hell is going on? I don't know. But the boss doesn't give those kinds of orders unless he's walking into something bad. She was already moving, grabbing her jacket, her phone, shoes. Send me his location, now. Mrs. Drayce, I don't care what you think. Send me his location, or I swear I will make your life a living hell. A pause. Then her phone pinged with coordinates. Industrial district in Incheon, same area as the warehouse. She was out the door before Minji could object. Volk. The driver who took her was one of Cassian's, a silent man named Kim, who asked no questions when she gave him the address and told him to break every traffic law necessary. They made it to Incheon in 23 minutes that felt like hours. The coordinates led to an abandoned factory complex, the kind of place where bad things happened and nobody asked questions. Kim pulled up to the gate and cut the engine. "Stay in the car," he said. First words he'd spoken the entire drive. "Not a chance. Mrs. Drayce, he's my husband. I'm going in." Kim looked at her for a long moment, then sighed and pulled a gun from his jacket. "Then stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understand?" She nodded. They moved through the complex in silence, Kim leading with the gun raised, Seraphina following close enough to feel the heat from his body. The buildings were skeletal ruins, walls tagged with graffiti, windows broken into jagged teeth. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear water dripping and the scuttle of rats. Then voices. Low and angry, coming from a warehouse ahead. Kim held up a hand for her to stop. They crept closer until they could see through a gap in the wall. Cassian stood in the center of the empty warehouse floor. No weapon visible, no backup, just him and Lucien Voss. And a woman. The woman was in her 30s, elegant in expensive clothes, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She stood beside Lucien with the casual comfort of someone who belonged there, who had always belonged there. Seraphina's brain struggled to process what she was seeing. "You should have taken the deal," Lucien was saying. His voice echoed in the empty space. "I gave you a way out. Retire gracefully. Hand over your territories, walk away with your life. And let you run Seoul?" Cassian's voice was steady. "Not happening. Then you've chosen death. For yourself, for your family, for everyone stupid enough to stand with you." Big talk from a man who's been hiding behind staged attacks and manipulated wives. Cassian shifted his weight slightly. "How long have you been planning this? Since Elena died? Or was this always the goal?" The woman beside Lucien laughed. It was a beautiful sound, rich and warm, and completely incongruous with the situation. "Oh, Cassian," she said, "you really don't know, do you?" And Seraphina's world tilted sideways, because she knew that voice. She'd heard it before. On a recording Cassian had played for her weeks ago when he was explaining family business, showing her how they tracked rivals. Elena Voss, Lucien's supposedly dead wife, very much alive. "You're dead," Cassian said flatly. "I saw the body, the funeral, You saw what we wanted you to see." Elena moved closer to him, circling like a predator. A body, burned beyond recognition, convenient dental records that matched. Very tragic, very final. The car accident was real, just not fatal. We staged my death that night because we needed the Drayce family to think they'd won. Needed you specifically to think you'd killed an innocent woman. She smiled. How did that guilt feel, Cassian? Carrying that for 7 years, knowing you'd murdered someone's wife? Cassian's expression didn't change, but Seraphina saw his hands curl into fists. Why? Because guilty men make mistakes, distracted men leave openings, and we needed you vulnerable. Lucien joined Elena in the circle around Cassian. Took longer than we planned. You're more resilient than we expected. But then you went and fell in love with that pretty little contract wife, and suddenly, leave her out of this. Too late. She's the entire point. Elena pulled out her phone and held it up. On the screen was surveillance footage. Seraphina in the cafe with Lucien yesterday. "You think she came to me by accident? That I just happened to approach her at a gala? We've been grooming her for months. Every chance encounter, every sympathetic conversation, every seed of doubt we planted about you." Seraphina felt Kim's hand grip her shoulder, holding her in place when she would have run forward. Her breath was coming too fast, chest tight, vision starting to narrow. "She called me tonight," Cassian said. His voice stayed level, but she could hear the strain underneath. "Told me about your threats. Chose me over you." "Of course she did, because that's what we told her to do." Lucien smiled. "Think about it. We push her, she runs to you, you trust her completely, and now," he pulled out a gun, "now she's going to watch you die. And then she's going to become the grieving widow who inherits control of the Drayce empire, and we're going to help her manage it, very carefully, very profitably, until there's nothing left of your family's power. She won't do it. She'll see through you. She'll be traumatized, desperate, looking for someone to help her navigate a world she doesn't understand. And we'll be right there. Elena's smile was vicious. We've spent 7 years planning this. You think we didn't account for every variable? Cassian looked past them, directly at the gap in the wall where Seraphina stood hidden. For one terrible moment she thought he'd seen her, but his eyes focused on empty air, and she realized he was just looking in her direction, toward the penthouse, toward home, toward a version of her that existed somewhere he couldn't reach. She's stronger than you think, he said quietly. We'll see. Lucian raised the gun. Any last words? Yeah. Cassian smiled, and it was the coldest thing Seraphina had ever seen. You talk too much. He moved, not away from the gun, toward it. Fast enough that Lucian's shot went wide, close enough that Cassian got his hand on the weapon and twisted. The gun hit the concrete floor and skittered away. Elena was already moving, pulling her own weapon, but Cassian caught her wrist and used her momentum to throw her into Lucian. Then the warehouse exploded with gunfire, not from the three of them, from the shadows. From positions Seraphina hadn't noticed, rafters, doorways, behind rusted equipment, Cassian's people, hidden and waiting. A trap inside a trap. Kim was pulling her back, away from the fight, but she couldn't stop watching. Cassian fighting with brutal efficiency, taking down one of Lucien's men with a blow that definitely broke something. Elena scrambling for her gun. Lucien shouting orders that got lost in the chaos. Then Cassian went down, not shot, tackled by 2 men who came from behind, dragging him to the ground. She saw his head hit the concrete, saw him struggle, saw one of the men pull out a syringe. No! She was moving before she could think, tearing away from Kim's grip and running into the warehouse. Stop! Don't! Everything froze. All eyes turned to her, including Cassian's. Seraphina, run! He started, but the man with the syringe jammed it into his neck and pressed the plunger. Cassian's eyes went wide, then unfocused, then closed. His body went limp. Well, Elena said, standing and brushing concrete dust from her clothes. That was convenient. Thank you for joining us, Mrs. Drayce. We were going to have to stage bringing you here, but this is so much more authentic. 2 men grabbed Seraphina's arms before she could react. She struggled, tried to pull free, but they were too strong. Kim was on the ground behind her, blood pooling under his head. Dead or unconscious, she couldn't tell. Lucien walked over to Cassian's unconscious body and pressed his boot against his throat. Not hard enough to kill, just hard enough to make a point. Here's what's going to happen, he said conversationally. Your husband is going to wake up in about an hour, and when he does, he's going to watch us break you, piece by piece, until you're willing to do anything, sign anything, say anything, become anything, to make it stop. He looked up at her. Unless you cooperate now, give us access to the Drayce accounts, the properties, the networks, everything. Make it easy, and we let him live. Refuse, and he pressed down slightly harder on Cassian's throat. Well, you'll watch him suffocate, slowly. I don't have access to any of that. He doesn't trust me with... Liar! Elena was beside her now, phone in hand. We've been monitoring the penthouse systems. He gave you partial access 3 days ago, enough to start transferring assets if you knew how, and we're going to teach you how. Seraphina looked at Cassian's unconscious face. Blood trickled from his temple where he'd hit the concrete. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Don't do it, came a hoarse whisper. Kim not dead after all. He'd rather die than... One of Lucien's men kicked him in the head and he went silent. Clock's ticking, Mrs. Drayce. Lucien pulled out a knife, pressing it against the unconscious Cassian's cheek. What's his life worth to you? His empire? Your freedom? Choose fast. She could barely breathe. Her heart was trying to break through her ribs. Every instinct screamed to do whatever they wanted, say anything, just make them stop hurting him. But she'd sat in enough meetings now to understand leverage, to understand power, to understand that once she gave them what they wanted, both she and Cassian were dead. They couldn't leave witnesses, couldn't leave anyone who could identify them or testify. This was always going to end with blood. Okay, she said. I'll do it. Just don't hurt him anymore. Elena smiled. Smart girl. We'll start with the offshore accounts. Small transfers, nothing that triggers automatic alerts. Then But I need my phone. The access codes are in an encrypted app. Nice try. We'll use one of ours. Yeah. It's biometric, fingerprint and facial recognition. Has to be my device or it won't unlock. She kept her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. It's in my jacket pocket. Your men can check it. It's just a phone. Lucien nodded. One of the men holding her reached into her jacket and pulled out her phone, handed it to Elena. Unlock it, Elena ordered. Seraphina took the phone with trembling hands, pressed her thumb to the sensor. The screen lit up. She opened the encrypted app Cassian had given her 3 days ago. Not for financial access. For emergencies. She pressed the red icon labeled Panic. Nothing visible happened. No sound. No alert. But somewhere in Seoul, every member of Cassian's security force just received a silent alarm with her exact GPS coordinates. Elena took the phone back, studying the screen. Which accounts? Start with the Cayman ones. Less monitored. Seraphina's voice was surprisingly steady. She just needed to stall. 5 minutes. 10 if they were lucky. However long it took for the cavalry to arrive. Show me, Elena said, handing back the phone. Seraphina pulled up the banking app, navigating slowly through menus, asking questions, stalling at every opportunity. Elena didn't notice. Neither did Lucien, who was too focused on Cassian's unconscious form to pay attention to the technical details. 4 minutes. These accounts need secondary authorization, Seraphina said. From the primary holder. I can't. Then wake him up. Lucien gestured to one of his men, who pulled out another syringe. Give him enough stimulant to get him conscious. We just need his thumbprint. No. If they woke Cassian, he'd do something stupid. Try to fight. Get himself killed. Wait. There's another way. A backup access through... She was making it up as she went. Anything to keep them from injecting Cassian with whatever was in that needle. 5 minutes. Then she heard it. Distant but growing closer. Engines. Multiple vehicles moving fast. Lucien heard it too. His head snapped toward the warehouse entrance. What did you do? What I had to. She met his eyes. You're not the only one who can set a trap. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Cassian's people poured in like a flood. 24 men, heavily armed, moving with military precision. Lucien's people scattered, returning fire, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. In the chaos, the men holding Seraphina released her to grab their weapons. She dropped to the ground, crawling toward Cassian through the gunfire. Bullets sparked off concrete around her. Someone screamed. Glass shattered. The air filled with cordite and blood. She reached Cassian and pulled his unconscious body behind a piece of rusted equipment. His pulse was there but slow. Whatever they'd given him was strong. Wake up, she whispered, slapping his cheek gently. Come on, wake up. I need you to wake up. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Cassian, please. Her voice broke. You told me you loved me. You don't get to do that and then die. That's not how this works. A hand grabbed her hair from behind, yanking her backward. Elena, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead, gun pressed against Seraphina's temple. You stupid bitch, she hissed. You just killed everyone in this building, including him. She gestured at Cassian with the gun. Should have taken the deal when you had the chance. Probably. Seraphina's hand closed around a piece of broken concrete. But I'm a slow learner. She swung the concrete up and back as hard as she could. Felt it connect with something that crunched. Elena's grip on her hair released. The gun went off, deafening this close, but the shot went wide. Seraphina scrambled away as Elena fell, clutching her face where the concrete had smashed her nose. Blood poured between her fingers. Then Minjae was there, gun raised, standing over Elena. Don't move. All around the warehouse, the gunfire was dying down. Lucien's people either dead or surrendering. Lucien himself was on his knees, hands behind his head, surrounded by 3 of Cassian's men. Seraphina crawled back to Cassian. His eyes were open now, barely, trying to focus on her face. Did we win? His voice was slurred, barely audible. We won. She pressed her forehead against his. You're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. You saved me. He sounded surprised. You actually... Of course I saved you. You're my husband. That's what... Her voice broke completely. That's what we do. He tried to smile, but his eyes were already closing again. Knew you were stronger than you thought. Cassian, stay awake. Please stay, But he was already unconscious again, and she was alone with the weight of his head in her lap, and the sound of Min-jae calling for medics, and the smell of blood and gunpowder thick in the air. Durchak. They took him to a private hospital, not the kind with insurance paperwork and waiting rooms, but the kind that existed solely to handle problems the Drayce family couldn't take to regular doctors. Seraphina rode in the ambulance with him, holding his hand while medics worked, listening to terminology she didn't understand. "He'll be fine," one of them said finally. Whatever they gave him was designed to incapacitate, not kill. He'll sleep it off in a few hours. And the head injury? Minor concussion. He's had worse. That wasn't as reassuring as it should have been. They put him in a private room that looked more like a hotel suite than a hospital. She sat beside his bed and watched him breathe, counting each inhale and exhale like prayer. Min-jae appeared in the doorway around dawn. "We need to talk." "Not now." "Yes, now." Before he wakes up and makes decisions. Min-jae moved into the room, closing the door behind him. Lucien and Elena Voss are in custody. So are the 6 men who survived the warehouse. They're talking, a lot, trying to cut deals. What kind of deals? Immunity in exchange for testimony about Drayce family operations. Names, dates, evidence. He paused. If even half of what they're claiming is true and gets to the right prosecutor, this family is done. Your husband goes to prison for the rest of his life. Probably you too, as an accomplice. She stared at him. So what do we do? We? Min-jae smiled slightly. 4 hours ago you weren't part of we. Now you're asking like you're making decisions. Everything changed 4 hours ago. Yeah, it did. He pulled a chair over and sat down. Here's the situation. We have maybe 48 hours before the authorities piece together what happened in Incheon. Maybe less. In that time, we need to decide, do we let the Voss couple talk, or do we make them disappear before they can? You mean kill them? I mean neutralize the threat, however necessary. Seraphina looked at Cassian's sleeping face, thought about everything he told her during that long night of confessions. Every choice, every body, every compromise that had brought him to this moment. What would he do? She asked. Usually, make them disappear, clean, quick, no evidence. Min-jae leaned forward, but lately he's been softer, hesitant, making choices with his heart instead of his head. That's why we're in this mess. He should have dealt with the Voss problem 7 years ago when Elena's death was still fresh. Instead, he carried guilt that made him vulnerable. Because he thought he'd killed an innocent woman. Because he's human. And humans don't survive long in this business. Min-jae's expression was flat. So I'm asking you, Mrs. Drayce, what do we do with the 2 people who tried to destroy your husband? The people who would have killed you both without hesitation? It should have been an easy answer. Self-defense, protecting her family, survival. But all she could think about was Cassian's voice in the study. How do you live with it? I don't, not really. We don't kill them, she said finally. Then we're dead, you understand that? They'll testify. We'll go to prison. Everything your husband built, we give them something better to testify about. She stood up, mind racing. They wanted to destroy the Drayce family. Fine, let's destroy it first. On our terms. Min-jae stared at her. What are you talking about? Cassian told me once that everyone in this world is a piece on someone's board. The only question is whether you know you're being played. She looked at him. So let's stop playing their game. Let's build a new board entirely. I don't. Get me a lawyer, not a criminal defense lawyer, a corporate one, someone who specializes in restructuring, and get me the family accountant, and... She paused, thinking. And get me Cassian's father. I need to talk to the old man before Cassian wakes up. You're out of your mind. Probably. She sat back down beside Cassian's bed. But I just orchestrated a tactical extraction under hostile fire using resources I barely understand in a world I've been part of for 3 weeks. So maybe crazy is what we need right now. Min-jae studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and pulled out his phone. I'll make the calls. But when the boss wakes up and finds out what you're planning, he'll be angry or proud or both. She squeezed Cassian's hand. Either way, he'll be alive. That's all that matters. Min-jae left, and she was alone again with her unconscious husband and a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal, and she wouldn't know which until it was too late to change course. Cassian's eyes opened around noon, groggy, confused, trying to focus on her face. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." His voice was rough. "Did I dream the part where you saved my life?" "No, that happened." "Good." He tried to sit up, winced, gave up. "Where's Lucien?" "Alive. In custody. Elena, too. They're trying to make deals." She watched his expression close down, saw him calculating options and consequences, saw the moment he decided what needed to be done. "No," she said before he could speak. "You don't know what I was going to say." "You were going to say we need to eliminate the threat, make them disappear, protect the family." She leaned closer. "And I'm telling you no. We're doing this differently. Seraphina, I met with your father this morning, and the family council, and a team of lawyers." She took a breath. "We're dissolving the Drayce criminal empire, systematically, legally, turning everything legitimate. The properties, the businesses, all of it. It'll take years, we'll lose money, we'll make enemies, but that's impossible. You can't just..." "We're already doing it. Papers are being filed as we speak." Your father agreed. Reluctantly, but he agreed. Because the alternative is watching his son go to prison. She squeezed his hand. "And because I convinced him that you're worth more alive and legitimate than dead and legendary." Cassian stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You convinced my father, the most ruthless man in Seoul, to give up his empire?" "I told him his grandson would rather have a father than an inheritance." She paused. "We don't have a son, but he doesn't know that. And by the time he figures it out, the papers will be signed and he'll be too invested to back out." Despite everything, the pain, the drugs, the concussion, Cassian laughed. It hurt him. She could see it in the way he clutched his ribs. But he laughed anyway. "You magnificent, terrifying woman," he said. "You just manipulated my father. No one manipulates my father." "I learned from the best." She kissed his forehead. "Now rest. When you're better, we have a lot of work to do. Dismantling an empire is apparently very complicated." "And Lucien? Elena?" "Will testify against the empire that no longer exists. Their evidence becomes irrelevant. They get to feel like they won. We get to walk away." She settled back in her chair. Not perfect, but alive. Cassian was quiet for a long moment, just looking at her. Then he said, "I love you. I know I said it last night, but I need to say it again. I love you, and I'm terrified of how much." "Good." She smiled. "Terrified is honest. I can work with terrified." He fell asleep shortly after, and she sat beside him watching Seoul through the window. The city looked the same as always, infinite and indifferent. But somewhere underneath its glittering surface, the foundation of an empire was starting to crack. And Seraphina Drayce, sat at the center of the earthquake she'd started, holding her husband's hand, and realized she'd finally stopped being a prisoner. She'd become the architect instead. The empire didn't die quietly. It took 3 weeks before the first real pushback came. Not from outside enemies, from inside. From the people who'd built their lives on the foundation Cassian was trying to dismantle. Seraphina was in a conference room on the 34th floor of the Drayce building when the door slammed open. Marcus Drayce, Cassian's cousin, the one who'd sent Elias to the hospital, walked in flanked by 4 men who looked like they'd been pulled from a war zone, guns visible under their jackets, violence barely leashed. "Meeting's over," Marcus said to the lawyers and accountants scattered around the table. "Get out." They left, fast. Smart people who knew when to run. Seraphina stayed seated. She'd learned that standing in these situations made you look weak, made you look like you were preparing to run. So she sat with her hands folded on the table and met Marcus's eyes with a calm she absolutely did not feel. "Marcus, we weren't expecting you." "I bet you weren't." He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, close enough to be threatening. "Where's Cassian?" "Meeting with the transition team. The legitimate business interests need..." "I don't give a fuck about legitimate business interests." He leaned forward. "Let me explain something to you, Mrs. Drayce. This family has spent 40 years building an empire. Blood empire. Real power. And now my cousin, who apparently can't think with anything except his dick, is burning it all down because you decided to play revolutionary. The empire was already burning. We're just controlling the collapse. Bullshit. The Voss situation was containable. Should have been contained. Instead, you convinced everyone to commit financial suicide. He pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. These are the numbers. What we're losing by going legitimate. Billions. Per quarter. You understand what that means? She looked at the numbers. They were bad. Worse than she'd admitted to Cassian. I understand it means we don't go to prison. We're already in prison. You just made the walls legitimate. He took the tablet back. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk into Cassian's office and tell him you made a mistake, that you got emotional after the warehouse, that you're not equipped to make these kinds of decisions. And if I don't, then the family votes no confidence, removes Cassian from leadership, installs someone more rational. He smiled. Me, probably. And the first thing I do is reverse every decision you've made in the last 3 weeks. You can't do that. Cassian's father is old and tired and ready to retire. He only agreed to your plan because you lied about a grandson. But guess what? I've been counting. You and Cassian have been married 3 years. No pregnancy, no baby, no leverage. Marcus stood up. So either you fix this today or I fix it tomorrow. Your choice. He left with his men. The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded like a gunshot. Seraphina sat alone in the conference room, staring at the Seoul skyline through the windows, and realized she'd made a critical miscalculation. She'd thought dissolving the empire would be about paperwork and legal strategy. She'd forgotten that empires were made of people, and people didn't let go of power without a fight. Her phone buzzed. Text from Min-jae. We have a problem. Marcus is talking to the council, pushing for a vote tonight. She called him immediately. Can he actually remove Cassian? If he gets enough votes? Yes. The family constitution allows for removal of leadership if 3/4 of the council agrees the current head is acting against family interests. How many votes does Marcus have? At least half. Maybe more. A lot of people are angry about the money they're losing, and you're an easy scapegoat, the outsider wife who came in and destroyed everything. Where's Cassian? Still in his meeting, doesn't know about Marcus yet. Don't tell him, not yet. She was already moving, grabbing her jacket and bag. I need to handle this. Mrs. Drayce, I started this. I finish it. She hung up before he could argue. The family council met in a private club in Gangnam, the kind of place where membership costs more than most people's houses, and everyone looked like they'd never done anything illegal in their lives. Seraphina walked in wearing a black dress and heels that cost more than she wanted to think about, and every head in the room turned to watch her approach. 15 people. The core of the Drayce family power structure. Men and women who'd built fortunes on violence and strategy, and all of them looking at her like she was an interesting problem they were about to solve. Cassian's father sat at the head of the table, older than Cassian by 30 years, but with the same ice-blue eyes, the same capacity for absolute stillness that preceded violence. Seraphina, he said, we weren't expecting you. I know, but since this meeting is apparently about me, I thought I should be here. She pulled out the empty chair beside him and sat down, uninvited, claiming space. Marcus says you're voting to remove Cassian tonight. I'd like to speak before you do. Marcus was across the table, flanked by supporters. This isn't your meeting. Shut up, Marcus. The old man's voice cracked like a whip. She's Cassian's wife. She has standing. He looked at Seraphina. You have 5 minutes? Use them well. She stood up. 15 pairs of eyes tracking her every move. Her heart was trying to break through her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. 3 weeks ago, I sat in a warehouse in Incheon and watched rival criminals try to kill my husband. They had a good plan, patient, strategic, 7 years in the making. They would have succeeded if Cassian hadn't been smarter, if I hadn't been lucky, if we hadn't worked together. She paused. But here's what I learned that night. The Voss couple knew everything, every operation, every vulnerability, every crack in this family's armor. Because this empire, the one you're so desperate to preserve, has been rotting from the inside for years. That's not someone started. Let her finish, the old man said. You think going legitimate is suicide, I think staying criminal is slower suicide. The Voss situation proved it. How many other enemies are out there? How many people have spent years planning your destruction? How many betrayals are coming that you don't even know about yet? She met Marcus's eyes. You want to go back to the old way? Fine. How long until the next Elena Voss walks through your door? How long until the next warehouse? The next trap? How long until one of you is lying on that concrete floor with your blood pooling around you? Silence. Heavy and complete. The Empire made you rich, she continued, but it's also made you targets. Every day you stay in the criminal world is another day someone out there is planning how to kill you. Your children, your families, everyone you care about. Is that really what you want? Or do you want to cash out while you still can? Take the billions you've already made and invest them in something that won't get your grandchildren murdered? Pretty speech, Marcus said, but it doesn't change the math. We're losing money in the short term. Yes, transitioning is expensive, but in 5 years, 10 years, we'll have built something sustainable, legal, protected by courts instead of guns, and more importantly, she pulled out her own tablet. I've spent the last 3 weeks analyzing every family member's assets, how much you have, where it's hidden, how much risk you're actually carrying. Want to know what I found? She pulled up a spreadsheet and projected it on the wall. Names, numbers, details that made several people shift uncomfortably in their seats. 12 of you are already transitioning to legitimate operations, quietly, behind everyone else's backs. Real estate, tech investments, import-export companies that actually import and export legal goods. She smiled. You're already doing what Cassian and I are proposing. You're just lying about it, pretending you're still gangsters while you move your money into legal channels. Marcus's face had gone pale. Where did you get... I'm married to Cassian Drayce. You think I don't have access to information? She was bluffing. Most of this she'd pieced together from overheard conversations and educated guesses, but they didn't know that. So here's the real question. Do we transition together in an organized way that protects everyone? Or do we keep pretending we're still an empire while you all secretly jump ship and leave everyone else to drown? The old man was smiling, actually smiling. You've been busy. I had motivation. Your son's life depends on this working. And you love him. It wasn't a question. More than I thought I could love anyone, even when he makes it difficult. She sat back down. So yes, I'm asking you to risk billions, to give up power, to walk away from everything you've built. Because the alternative is watching it burn anyway, slower, messier, with more bodies. Cassian's father stood up. I'm changing my vote. Cassian stays. The transition continues. He looked around the table. Anyone who wants to challenge that can do it now, to my face. Nobody moved, not even Marcus. Meeting adjourned, the old man said. People started filing out, some shooting Seraphina looks that ranged from impressed to furious. Marcus left without a word, but the violence in his eyes was clear. This wasn't over. It was just paused. When the room was empty except for her and Cassian's father, he said, That was well done. Risky. You were guessing about the secret transitions. 70% guessing, 30% overhead conversations. Still impressive. He studied her with those ice blue eyes that looked so much like his son's. You're not what I expected when Cassian married you. I thought you'd be decorative, compliant, a pretty face to make us look legitimate. Sorry to disappoint. You didn't disappoint. You exceeded expectations so dramatically, I'm almost concerned. He moved toward the door, then paused. My son loves you, more than he's loved anything. That makes you the most powerful weapon anyone could use against him, and also the only person who might actually save him from himself. I'm trying. Keep trying, because if this transition fails, if we can't make legitimate work, there are people in this family who will burn everything down rather than admit they were wrong, and they'll start with you. He left her alone in the conference room. She sat there for a long moment, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, and realized she'd just declared war on half of Cassian's family. Her phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. Impressive performance. But you forgot something important. I'm still alive, and I still have evidence. Lucian ice flooded her veins. The Voss couple was supposed to be in custody, isolated, no contact with the outside world while prosecutors built their case. She called Min-jae. Where are Lucien and Elena Voss? Secure facility. Why? I just got a text from Lucien's number. Silence on the other end. Then, that's impossible. We took all their devices. They're in separate cells with no communication. Then someone is helping them. Someone with access. She was already moving toward the exit. Where's Cassian? Still at the transition meeting. Should be done soon. Get him out of there, now, and get him somewhere secure. What's happening? I don't know yet, but Lucien doesn't make contact unless he has leverage. She hung up and stared at her phone. Another text appeared. Meet me in 1 hour. Alone. Or I release everything I know about the Drayce family to every prosecutor in Seoul. Your transition dies. Your husband goes to prison. You lose everything. Address attached. Come alone or don't come at all. The address was a building in Itaewon, commercial district, public, relatively safe. Probably a trap. Definitely a trap. She should call Cassian, should call Min-jae, should bring security and backup and do this smart. Instead, she got in her car and started driving. The building was a karaoke complex, 5 stories of private rooms where people paid to sing badly and drink heavily. The kind of place where nobody paid attention to anyone else's business. Perfect for a clandestine meeting. The text had specified room 504, 5th floor. Seraphina took the stairs instead of the elevator, hand on the knife she'd started carrying 3 weeks ago when she'd realized her life had become the kind where carrying knives made sense. Room 504 was at the end of the hall, door slightly ajar, music thumping from other rooms, off-key singing and laughter. She pushed the door open. Lucien sat on the couch inside, looking relaxed and comfortable like he was waiting for friends. No visible weapons, no obvious backup. You came, he said. I wasn't sure you would. Where's Elena? Somewhere safe. Unlike me. He gestured at his ankle. House arrest bracelet. I've got about 45 minutes before the signal disruption I arranged stops working and they realize I'm gone, so let's make this quick. What do you want? To make a deal. You convinced the family to go legitimate. Impressive. But you forgot something. He pulled out a tablet. I spent 7 years collecting evidence about Drayce operations. Not just Cassian, the entire family. Names, dates, transactions. Crimes that go back 40 years. Everything prosecutors would need to take down the whole empire. We're already transitioning. Doesn't matter. Past crimes don't disappear because you decide to go straight. Your father-in-law has personally ordered at least 50 murders. Cassian's been complicit in dozens more. You think going legitimate erases that? He set the tablet down. I have enough here to put everyone you love in prison for life. Multiple life sentences, and I'm planning to release it. Unless what? Unless you give me what I actually wanted. Not revenge, not justice. Control. He leaned forward. Here's the deal. I want 40% ownership of the new legitimate businesses. Silent partner. I don't run anything, don't make decisions, just collect profits. In exchange, this evidence disappears, permanently. You want us to buy your silence? I want compensation for 7 years of planning you just destroyed. Elena and I were going to take over the empire, run Seoul. Instead, you're dismantling it. Fine. But I still want my cut. His smile was cold. 40% of billions is better than 100% of nothing. And if I say no, then tomorrow morning, every prosecutor in Seoul gets a copy of this. He tapped the tablet. The transition fails. The family fractures. Everyone goes to prison. And 7 years from now, when you're visiting Cassian behind bars, you can think about how you chose pride over pragmatism. She wanted to kill him. Actually kill him. The knife was right there in her jacket. One quick movement and this problem would be solved. But that was the old way. The criminal way. The way that had brought them here. 20%, she said. 40. 25. And you never contact us again. Never threaten us. Never come to Seoul. You take your money and disappear. Lucien considered this. 30. Final offer. Done. The word tasted like poison. But I need guarantees, the evidence destroyed, verified, before any transfer happens. Obviously, I'm not an idiot. He stood up. I'll have my lawyers contact yours. We'll structure it as a legitimate investment deal. Everyone walks away clean. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, you would have made a good criminal. Smart, ruthless when necessary. Cassian's lucky to have you. Get out. He left, and she was alone in the karaoke room with bass thumping through the walls and her heart hammering so hard she thought she might vomit. She just made a deal with the man who tried to kill her husband. Given him exactly what he wanted. Betrayed everything Cassian had taught her about never negotiating with enemies. Her phone rang. Cassian. She almost didn't answer, but not answering would be worse. Hey, she said, trying to sound normal. Where are you? Minji said you left the club an hour ago. Just driving. Needed to think. About Marcus? Minji told me about the meeting. About what you did. His voice was warm, proud. You stood up to the entire family council. You're incredible. Thanks. The word came out flat. Are you okay? You sound fine. Just tired. It's been a long day. Come home. We'll order dinner. Celebrate. You just saved the transition. She wanted to tell him, wanted to confess what she'd just done, but the words wouldn't come. Because if she told him, he'd try to fix it, try to renegotiate, try to find another way. And there wasn't another way. Lucien had them cornered. I'll be home soon, she said. I love you. Love you too. She hung up before he could hear her voice break. Achikult. She didn't go home. She drove to the secure facility where Elena Voss was being held, showed her credentials, the ones that identified her as Cassian Drayce's wife, and gave her access to almost everything. The guards let her through without question. Elena was in a private room, comfortable as far as prison cells went. She looked up when Seraphina entered, and something like amusement crossed her face. Mrs. Drayce, what an unexpected pleasure. Your husband just blackmailed me into giving him 30% of our legitimate businesses. I know, it was my idea. Elena smiled. Revenge is satisfying, but money is practical. We'd rather be rich than right. You tried to kill us. And you tried to destroy us. Seems fair. She leaned back on her bunk. So why are you here? To threaten me, to beg, to kill me, to kill, to make sure you understand what happens if Lucien doesn't keep his word. Seraphina moved closer, keeping her voice low. You think you won. You think you got away with it. But here's what you don't know. I spent 3 weeks dismantling a criminal empire. I manipulated Cassian's father. I faced down the family council. I convinced 15 of the most dangerous people in Seoul to commit financial suicide. Congratulations? My point is, I'm done playing by rules, yours or anyone else's. So if Lucien releases that evidence after we pay him, if he comes back for more money, if he so much as breathes wrong, she pulled out her knife. Let Elena see it. I will personally end both of you, not Cassian, not his people, me. And I'll do it slow enough that you regret every choice that brought you here. Elena's smile had disappeared. That's a threat. That's a promise. From one woman who's been underestimated to another. She put the knife away. Enjoy your cell. Try not to think about the fact that your husband just sold you out for a percentage. She left before Elena could respond. So much. Cassian was waiting in the penthouse when she finally got home around midnight, sitting in the dark by the windows, looking out at Seoul like he was trying to memorize it. You lied to me, he said without turning around. Her blood froze. What? You didn't go for a drive. You went to meet Lucien. Then you went to see Elena. He finally looked at her. Minjae had you followed. Protocol when family members leave without security. He called me an hour ago. She couldn't breathe. Cassian, He blackmailed you, threatened to release evidence, and you made a deal without telling me. His voice was absolutely flat. 30% of everything we're building, given to the man who tried to kill us, because you thought you could handle it alone. I was protecting you. I don't need protection. The explosion was sudden, volcanic. I need a partner. Someone who trusts me enough to tell me when we're being blackmailed. Not someone who makes backroom deals and lies about where she's been. You would have tried to fight him. You would have refused to negotiate. And we would have lost everything. Maybe. But that would have been my choice to make. Our choice. Together. He stood up and she could see exhaustion carved into his face. I've spent 3 weeks letting you in. Showing you everything. trusting you with decisions that could destroy us. And the first time you face a real crisis, you handle it alone. Like I'm still the enemy you need to protect yourself from. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is that I'm standing here wondering if you even want this partnership, or if you just want to control everything because that's the only way you feel safe. The accusation hit like a physical blow. I saved the transition tonight. I faced down Marcus and the council. I stopped them from removing you. And I'm grateful, but then you turned around and made a deal that undermines everything we're trying to build, because you didn't trust me enough to help. He moved toward the stairs. I'm sleeping in my old room tonight. I need space. Cassian, wait. No, not tonight. Tonight I need to decide if this partnership is actually equal or if I just traded one kind of prison for another. He paused on the stairs. I love you. That hasn't changed, but love isn't enough if we can't trust each other. He disappeared upstairs, and she was alone. Again. Always alone, even when surrounded by people. She pulled out her phone and looked at the message from Lucien, at the deal she'd made, at the choice she'd made to handle everything herself because that's what she'd learned. Trust no one, control everything, survive at all costs. And realized Cassian was right. She'd built a new cage, different walls, different locks, but still a cage. Her phone buzzed. Text from Min Jae. We have a problem. Marcus is making his move. He's calling an emergency council meeting tomorrow morning, claiming you made unauthorized deals that compromise family security. He has enough votes now. Cassian gets removed. You get expelled from the family. It's over unless we can change the momentum. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she made a decision. Not the safe decision, not the controlled decision, the decision that would either save everything or destroy it completely. She called Min Jae back. Set up a meeting tomorrow morning before the council meets. I need Cassian, his father, Marcus, and the 3 most influential council members. No one else. What are you planning? Something stupid, probably suicidal, definitely the only option we have left. She looked out at Seoul glittering in the darkness. We're going nuclear. One way or another, this ends tomorrow. She hung up before he could argue. Then she went upstairs to Cassian's old room and knocked on the door. He opened it after a long moment, looking exhausted and hurt and still so beautiful it made her chest ache. I need to tell you something, she said, and you're going to be angry, but I need you to hear it anyway. He stepped aside to let her in, and she told him everything. About Lucien's deal, about threatening Elena, about the choice she'd made to handle it alone because she'd been so terrified of losing him that she'd pushed him away instead. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You're right. I am angry. I know, but I also understand why you did it, and that's the problem, because I would have done the same thing, made the same choice, handled it alone rather than risk you. He pulled her against him, and she could feel his heart hammering. We're both so fucked up, both so used to survival meaning isolation that we can't figure out how to do this together. So what do? We try harder. We fail better. We stop trying to protect each other and start trying to trust each other. He kissed her forehead. And tomorrow, we face Marcus together, as equals, as partners, and we either win together or burn together. Those are really our only options? In our world? Yeah, pretty much. She laughed despite everything. Despite the fear and exhaustion and the certainty that tomorrow would either save them or end them completely. Then let's make it count, she said. And they spent the rest of the night planning a war they'd have to win by dawn. The meeting was set for 6 a.m. Too early for most people, but that was the point. Wars were won by whoever woke up first, whoever moved fastest, whoever was willing to sacrifice sleep and comfort for victory. Cassian had taught her that. Now she was about to use it against his own family. They arrived separately, her and Cassian together, the other staggered by 15 minutes to avoid looking like a conspiracy. The location was neutral ground, a conference room in a building the family owned but rarely used. Gray walls, no windows, a table that seated exactly 8 people. Cassian's father was already there when they walked in, sitting at the head of the table like he'd never stopped being in charge. Marcus came in 5 minutes later with his smuggest expression, the one that said he thought he'd already won. Then the 3 council members, Park, a woman in her 60s who controlled the family's real estate operations, Chen, who ran their tech investments, and Quan, the oldest member, who'd been with the family since before Cassian was born. 8 people. The core of everything. Either this room saved them or buried them. "This better be good," Marcus said, pulling out a chair. "I have an actual council meeting in 2 hours where we're voting to remove the both of you." "We know," Seraphina said. She remained standing while everyone else sat, a small power play Cassian had suggested. "That's why we're here, to give you a choice before that vote happens." "What choice?" Park asked. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes were calculating. Seraphina pulled out a tablet and set it in the center of the table. "Last night, Lucien Voss blackmailed me. He has evidence of family crimes going back 40 years, names, dates, transactions, everything prosecutors would need to destroy us. He demanded 30% ownership of our legitimate businesses in exchange for his silence." Marcus's smile widened. "And you're just telling us this now, after you made the deal?" "I'm telling you because I want you to understand what's at stake." She pressed play on the tablet. Audio recording. Her voice in Lucy Sheehan's, the entire conversation from the karaoke room. When it finished, the silence in the room was absolute. "You recorded him," Chen said slowly, "without telling him." "Yes, because I needed proof of the blackmail. And because—" She pulled up another file. "While I was making the deal, Cassian's team was raiding the secure facility where Lucien was supposed to be under house arrest. We found the evidence he claimed to have. All of it. Hard drives, documents, everything." She let that sink in. "So the choice is this," Cassian said, standing beside her. "We can destroy the evidence. All of it. Burn it before prosecutors ever see it. In exchange, you support the transition. You stop fighting us. You commit fully to going legitimate. Or," Marcus leaned back in his chair, "or we let Lucien release everything. The entire family goes down. Everyone in this room spends the rest of their lives in prison, including you, Marcus, because your name is all over these files. The warehouse you hit 3 years ago in Busan, the politician you bribed in Daegu, it's all here." Marcus's face had gone pale. "You're bluffing." Seraphina pulled up a specific document and turned the tablet so he could see it. His signature, his orders, dated and documented. "We're not bluffing," she said quietly. "We're offering you a way out, but only if you stop trying to destroy what we're building." Park spoke up. "If you have all the evidence, why do you need us? Just destroy it and move on." "Because the evidence isn't the real problem," Cassian said. "The real problem is that half this family is still living in the past, still thinking like criminals, still believing power comes from violence and fear. And as long as that's true, we'll never successfully transition. Someone will always be making the old deals, keeping the old contacts, pulling us back into the world we're trying to leave." His father had been silent through all of this, just watching. Now he spoke. "You want unity, complete commitment, everyone in or everyone out?" "Yes," Seraphina said. "No more hedging, no more secret criminal operations on the side. We go legitimate completely, or we don't go at all." "And if we refuse," Marcus's voice was sharp, "if we decide we'd rather take our chances with the evidence, then we release it ourselves," Cassian said, "strategically. We turn state's evidence, give prosecutors everything they need to take down the criminal operations while protecting the legitimate businesses. You go to prison. We don't. And we rebuild the family from scratch without you." The threat hung in the air like smoke. "You'd betray your own family," Marcus said. "Throw us to prosecutors to save yourself." "To save the family," Seraphina corrected. "There's a difference. You're not the family, Marcus. You're the cancer we're trying to cut out, the part that keeps dragging us back into violence and chaos." "I'm the only one here with the balls to say what everyone's thinking." Marcus stood up, leaning forward on the table. "That you two are playing house with billions of dollars. That you're dismantling an empire because you're in love and think that means you can rewrite reality. That you're going to fail, spectacularly, and take all of us down with you." "Maybe," Cassian said. "But at least we'll fail trying something different." "What's your plan, Marcus? Keep running the same operations the same way until someone bigger and meaner comes along and takes everything? Until prosecutors finally build a case that sticks? Until you end up like the Voss couple, desperate and willing to do anything because you've run out of options?" The Voss couple almost won. The Voss couple spent 7 years planning and still lost. Because they were fighting the last war, using old tactics, thinking revenge would solve anything. Cassian moved around the table until he was standing directly across from Marcus. You want to know why we'll succeed where they failed? Because we're not trying to preserve power. We're trying to transform it, and that's the only strategy nobody sees coming. Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the others. This is insane. You know that, right? They're asking us to commit financial suicide based on some fantasy about going straight. We're asking you to survive, Seraphina said. That's all. Just survive long enough to see if this works. Quan, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was gravelly with age. I've been with this family for 43 years. I've seen us rise. I've seen us nearly fall. I've buried friends and enemies and people I couldn't tell the difference between. He looked at Cassian. Your grandfather would have killed anyone who suggested going legitimate. Your father, he glanced at the old man, your father would have considered it weakness. But times change, the world changes, and families either change with it or die. So you're supporting them? Marcus asked. I'm supporting survival, however it looks. Quan leaned back. Release the evidence. Burn it. I don't care. But I'm voting to keep Cassian as head of this family, because he's the only one smart enough to see the trap we've been in. Chen nodded slowly. I'm in. The tech investments are already legitimate. I've been transitioning for 2 years. This just makes it official. Park took longer to decide. Finally, she said, I want guarantees, written contracts, protections for family members who fully commit to the transition. But yes, I'll support this. 3 votes. That left Marcus and Cassian's father. The old man stood up slowly, every year of his age visible in the careful way he moved. Marcus, you have a choice. Support your cousin, support this family, or leave, tonight. Take whatever money you've already hidden away and disappear. But if you stay, if you fight this, I will personally make sure you regret it. You're threatening me? Marcus's voice shook with rage. After everything I've done for this family, you've done nothing for this family except cause problems. The old man's voice was ice. You sent that architect to the hospital. You've been skimming from operations for 3 years. Yes, I know about that. You've been positioning yourself to take over since Cassian was 20. And I've let it happen because I thought competition would make him stronger. But you're not competition. You're poison. Father, Cassian started. No, let me finish. The old man looked at Marcus. I'm giving you an out, a chance to walk away with your life and your freedom. Take it. Because if you force this vote, if you make me choose between you and my son, you already know how that ends. Marcus's hands were shaking, with rage or fear or both. This is a mistake. All of it. You're going to destroy everything we built. We already destroyed it, Cassian said quietly. 3 weeks ago in that warehouse, when the Voss couple proved how vulnerable we really were. We're just cleaning up the rubble and building something new. You can help, or you can leave, but you can't stop it. For a moment, Seraphina thought Marcus would fight, thought he'd flip the table or pull a weapon, or do something violent and stupid that would end with someone dead on the floor. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the desperate weighing of options. Then he grabbed his jacket and walked out. No threats, no dramatic exit speech, just gone. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Well, Park said into the silence, that was easier than expected. He'll come back, Chen said, or he'll try something. Marcus doesn't give up. Then we'll handle it when it happens. Cassian sat down heavily. The exhaustion was visible now, the toll of 3 weeks of constant crisis. But for now, we won. The transition continues. We vote this morning to confirm it, and we start the real work of actually making this succeed. His father nodded. I'll handle the rest of the council. Make sure everyone understands this is final. He looked at Seraphina. You did well, both of you. I didn't think it was possible, changing this family. But you're actually doing it. We're trying, she said. That's all anyone can do. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For forcing this marriage. For treating you like a transaction. You deserved better. I got better, Seraphina said, looking at Cassian. Eventually. The old man smiled slightly and left. The others filtered out until it was just the 2 of them in the gray room with no windows. Cassian put his head in his hands. We actually did it, he said. We survived. For now. She sat down beside him. Marcus is still out there. Lucien still has copies of evidence we might have missed. And half the family is going to spend the next 5 years resenting us for making them go straight. So, basically Tuesday in our world, she laughed. Actual laughter that hurt her chest. Yeah, basically. He lifted his head and looked at her. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Do you regret it? Any of it? Marrying me? Getting pulled into this world? Fighting these wars? She thought about that restaurant 3 weeks ago that felt like 3 lifetimes. About Elias and his kind eyes and the normal life that had seemed so appealing. About every choice that had brought her to this gray room with a man whose world had nearly destroyed them both. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. I regret how long it took us to figure out how to actually be partners. I regret the people who got hurt along the way. But the marriage, this life, you? She took his hand. No regrets. Even knowing what you know now, how hard it is, how much it costs. Especially knowing that, because the hard things are the ones worth doing, and you're worth fighting for, even when you make it difficult. He pulled her close, and they sat there in the silence of survival. 2 people who'd started as strangers in a contract marriage and somehow become something real, something that had survived blackmail and betrayal and war. What happens now? She asked. Now we go home. Sleep for 12 hours. Wake up and start the actual work of running legitimate businesses. He paused. And eventually, maybe, we figure out how to just be married, without the constant crisis, without enemies and plots. Just us. That sounds boring. That sounds like heaven. 3 months later, Seraphina stood in the office that used to be Cassian's war room and was now just an office. The surveillance monitors were gone. The weapons cache hidden behind the bookshelf had been cleared out and replaced with actual books. The desk where they'd planned operations now held quarterly reports and legal contracts. It was strange how quickly violence could be replaced by paperwork. You ready? Cassian asked from the doorway. He was in a suit, the kind businessmen wore, not the kind gangsters wore. The difference was subtle, but real. For what? The interview, that journalist from the Economic Review, the one doing a story on family businesses transitioning to legitimate operations. Right. That. She'd been dreading this all week, sitting down with someone whose job was asking uncomfortable questions and expecting her to lie convincingly. We don't have to do it, Cassian said, reading her expression. We can cancel. No. We need the legitimacy. Need people to see us as real business operators, not criminals playing dress-up. She straightened her jacket. I can handle 1 interview. I know you can. You faced down my entire family. 1 journalist should be easy. The interview was scheduled in a restaurant. Public, recorded, professional. The journalist was a woman in her 40s named Kim Min-seo, who had a reputation for aggressive questions hidden under polite phrasing. She started gentle. Basic questions about the family business, the transition, the challenges of going legitimate. Seraphina answered carefully, using the lines they'd practiced. Yes, it was difficult. Yes, they'd faced pushback. No, they didn't regret the choice. Then Min-seo said, I've been researching your family for 6 months, and I keep finding gaps. Operations that closed suddenly. People who disappeared. Money that moved in ways that don't quite make sense legally. She looked between them. So my question is, how legitimate is this transition? Or are you just better at hiding the criminal operations? The table went silent. Cassian started to answer, but Seraphina put a hand on his arm. I'll take this one. She looked directly at Min-seo. You want the truth? The whole truth? Fine. 3 months ago, this family was still operating criminal enterprises. Smuggling, money laundering, violence, all of it. We made a choice to stop, to transition everything to legal operations. And yes, it's been messy. Yes, there are gaps in the story because some things we can't talk about for legal reasons. But we're trying, actually trying, to be better than what we were. That's a nice story. It's not a story. It's reality. And reality is complicated and ugly and doesn't fit into neat narratives about redemption. Seraphina leaned forward. You want to write about perfect people making perfect choices? Interview someone else. But if you want to write about what it actually takes to change, the cost, the compromise, the constant fear that you're going to fail, then write about us. Honestly, including all the uncomfortable parts. Minseo studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled slightly. That's the best answer anyone's given me in 10 years of journalism. Can I quote you directly? Please do. The rest of the interview was easier, more honest, less performance. When they left 2 hours later, Cassian said, "That was risky, admitting we used to be criminals. Everyone already knows. We might as well own it." She took his hand as they walked through Seoul's evening crowds. Besides, I'm tired of lying, tired of pretending we're something we're not. If we're going to be legitimate, let's actually be legitimate, flaws and all. When did you get so wise? When I married a man who taught me that survival sometimes means admitting you're broken and building something new anyway. They walked in silence for a while, just two people among millions, anonymous in the city that had nearly destroyed them. Somewhere above, the sky was turning pink and gold with sunset. Somewhere below, the subway rumbled with commuters heading home. Normal people living normal lives. And for the first time in 3 years, Seraphina felt like maybe she could be one of them. Not completely, not yet. Probably never completely. But close enough. 6 months after that, the article ran. It was brutal and honest and made them look human in a way that was somehow worse than looking criminal. But it was true. And truth was the foundation they were building on now. The transition was working, slowly, expensively, with setbacks and failures and moments where Seraphina wondered if Marcus had been right, if they were just destroying everything for nothing. But they were making it work. The legitimate businesses were growing. The criminal operations were shut down, one by one, with severance packages for people who'd built their lives around them. Some left angry, some left relieved. But they left. Lucian kept his word, took his 30% and disappeared to somewhere in Southeast Asia. They heard rumors occasionally that he'd invested in tech startups, that he was dating someone half his age, that he still told stories about the time he almost took down the Drayce empire. Elena was released from custody after serving 18 months for conspiracy. She left Korea entirely, last seen in Paris running an art gallery. Sometimes Seraphina wondered if she was happy, if revenge and prison and losing had taught her anything. But mostly, she just hoped they'd never meet again. Marcus was the wild card. He'd taken his money and disappeared, but people like Marcus didn't stay disappeared. Cassian had people watching for him, waiting for the inevitable moment when he'd try something. But months passed and nothing happened. Maybe he'd actually let go. Maybe he was plotting something they hadn't anticipated yet. Either way, they'd handle it when it came. The penthouse changed. Seraphina's floor and Cassian's floor stopped being separate territories and became just rooms in a home they shared. They knocked down walls, literally and figuratively, created space that was theirs, not his or hers, but theirs together. It was strange how much easier everything became once they stopped fighting each other and started fighting together. One evening, almost a year after the warehouse, they were having dinner on the balcony overlooking Seoul. The city glittered beneath them like it always had, infinite and indifferent. "I got a call from your father today," Cassian said, pouring wine. "He wants to officially retire, hand over complete control to us." "What did you tell him?" "That I'd talk to you first, because we make decisions together now. Apparently that's what functional marriages do." He smiled. "Who knew?" She laughed. "Do you want it? Complete control?" "I want partnership, shared control. You and me running this family together, actual equals. Not me in charge and you supporting, not you making all the decisions while I recover. Together." "That's terrifying. That's marriage." "Same thing, apparently." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Seraphina said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't gone to that restaurant? If I'd never met Elias? If we just continued the way we were? Every day. And I'm grateful you did, because it broke something open, forced us to actually look at each other instead of just existing in parallel." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm sorry it took a crisis. I'm sorry I kept you at distance for so long. I'm sorry I thought protecting you meant isolating you. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder sooner. I'm sorry I accepted the isolation because it felt safer than demanding more. We were both cowards. We were both surviving the only way we knew how. And now? Now we're surviving together, which is infinitely harder, but also infinitely better. The city lights burned beneath them. Somewhere down there, people were living their lives. Normal people with normal problems, people who would never know about criminal empires or violent transitions, or the cost of choosing truth over comfort. Seraphina used to envy those people. Now she just pitied them slightly. Because they'd never know what it felt like to stand on a balcony 42 floors up beside someone you'd fought to keep, someone you'd bled for, someone you'd chosen every day, even when choosing them was the hardest thing you'd ever done. "I love you," she said. "I know I say it all the time now, but I need you to know I mean it every time, even when we're fighting, even when this is hard, especially when this is hard." "I know," Cassian smiled, "and I love you, for all the reasons I was afraid to at the beginning, because you're strong and ruthless and willing to burn the world down to protect what matters, because you made me better by refusing to accept the version of myself I was pretending to be." "We made each other better?" "Yeah, we did." They stayed on the balcony until the city quieted, until the crowds thinned and the lights dimmed and Seoul showed its night face, until it was just the two of them and the infinite space between what they'd been and what they were becoming. 3 years after signing papers in her father's office, Seraphina Drayce stood beside her husband and looked out at the city they'd almost lost, and the empire they'd transformed, and the life they'd built from the wreckage of violence and control. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and still carried scars they'd never completely heal from. But it was theirs. And that made it worth every impossible choice, every terrible cost, every moment she'd thought she wouldn't survive. "What are you thinking?" Cassian asked. "That I stopped being trapped the moment I chose this life for myself." "That's a good thought." "Yeah." She turned to face him, the city glittering behind her, the night air cool on her skin. "It really is." He kissed her then, and it was gentle and fierce and full of promise. The kind of kiss that said they'd made it through the war and come out the other side. Not unscathed, never unscatched, but together, always together. And in the city below, Seoul continued its endless rhythm, rising and falling, building and breaking, surviving and transforming, just like everything else that refused to die quietly. Just like them. Amaskit. The end. Years later, when people asked Seraphina Drayce how she'd survived being married to one of Seoul's most dangerous men, she'd smile that small, knowing smile that had become her signature and say simply, "I stopped trying to survive and started trying to live." And when they asked how she'd helped transform a criminal empire into a legitimate business dynasty, she'd answer with the truth that had taken her years to learn. One choice at a time, one crisis at a time, one moment of choosing partnership over control. But what she never told them, what she kept private, locked away in memory like treasure, was the real answer. She'd survived by learning that love wasn't safety. Love was two people standing in the wreckage of everything they'd destroyed and everything that had tried to destroy them, and choosing each other anyway. Love was messy and brutal and infinitely complicated. Love was worth it, every single impossible moment, and she'd choose it again, every time.